The early morning light stretched across the horizon, a soft golden hue that bathed the world in warmth. The air was crisp, cool with the promise of a new day. But for me, the day had long since lost its magic. I sat in my wheelchair, the wheels clicking softly against the gravel driveway as my father wheeled me out to the small patch of grass that separated the house from the barn. The world beyond that patch felt like an unreachable dream, far out of my grasp, and it had been that way for years. Once, I had been full of energy, running, jumping, climbing, like any other child. But that was before the accident, before the moment my life had changed in an instant. A broken leg, a shattered spine, and suddenly, my legs were nothing more than dead weight. They no longer worked, and neither did my spirit for a long while. My father, kind and patient, had spent every day by my side, trying to pull me out of my world of darkness. He would talk to me, encourage me, and bring me outside to breathe the fresh air. But it never felt the same. "Let's get you out to the fields today," my father's voice broke through my thoughts as he wheeled me over the uneven terrain. His hands were strong, but his voice was always gentle, like he was handling a precious thing. I nodded, not really seeing the world around me but hearing the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the soft thud of the horses' hooves in the stable. The horses had always been his passion. I never understood it. They seemed too wild, too untamable. And I was too broken to connect with such creatures. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the light shifted or the gentle breeze that tugged at my hair. Or maybe it was just the fact that I hadn't been out here in a while. The barn stood ahead of us, and I felt an unexpected pull in my chest. I hadn't been near the horses in ages. I heard my father speaking to someone, a deep voice that carried a sense of urgency. "Dad?" I asked softly, still lost in the quiet beauty of the moment. "Oh, sweetheart," my father turned toward me, a warm smile on his face. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." I turned my head slowly, trying to catch a glimpse of who he was talking to. At first, I couldn't see clearly, just the shadow of someone standing by the barn, and a flicker of movement. Then, through the fog of my thoughts, I saw him. The horse. The first thing I noticed was his size. The horse was tall, his body a mass of muscle and strength, yet there was a sadness in the way he stood. His head was low, ears drooping as if carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The coat that should have been thick and lustrous was thin, patchy, a pale brown that made him look weary. His ribs were visible, stark against his side, and his eyes were dark and full. I couldn't understand what it was about him that captivated me. I had always thought of horses as majestic, wild creatures, but this one? He seemed different, more fragile. "That's Thunder," my father said, his voice tinged with a certain softness. "He's a rescue. Came from a terrible place." I nodded, still staring at the horse. My fingers tightened around the armrests of my wheelchair, and my heart quickened, though I didn't know why. Thunder's eyes met mine for a split second, and then he lowered his gaze again, shuffling his hooves as if he w. "What happened to him?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "He was mistreated," my father answered. "Malnourished, neglected. It's taken a lot of work to bring him back to health. But he's still not the same horse he once was. He's skittish. He doesn't trust easily." I swallowed, feeling an odd connection to the horse in that moment. I understood what it was like to feel lost, to feel as though no one could ever help. "Thursday." But I wasn't ready to admit that, Ev. The horse was just a creature, and I was just a girl in a chair. Two different worlds, two different pains. No connection. None. But as my father took a few slow steps toward Thunder, the horse moved closer as well, his large head low, eyes softening as if sensing something. My father spoke to him in a calm voice. I could hear the quiet words of reassurance, the soft tone of a man who knew how to soothe an animal's troubled soul. But I didn't understand it. Then, something strange happened. Thunder lifted his head, and for the first time, his eyes locked onto mine again. This time, I didn't look away. I felt a jolt, something like recognition. It was fleeting, but it was there. His gaze lingered for a moment longer than it should have, almost as if he saw beyond the wheelchair, beyond the girl who couldn't move, to something else. "Some tea." The air had a weight to it, thick with the anticipation of something unknown, something unexpected. I sat in my wheelchair, the wheels pressing against the gravel driveway as my father talked softly to Thunder, encouraging the horse to approach. There was something about the way my father spoke to the animal, as if every word was meant to bridge the gap between their worlds, to coax trust from a creature who had never known it. Thunder shifted on his hooves, a soft, hesitant movement, before he took a few steps toward us. His body swayed slightly, as though every motion was a calculation, a step toward something uncertain. I held my breath, unable to tear my eyes away from him. "Don't be scared," my father murmured, reaching out with a hand to gently stroke Thunder's flank. "It's okay, boy. You're safe now." I wanted to ask more about him, about his past, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just watched, mesmerized by the fragile connection between man and animal. Thunder's eyes remained clouded, distant, as if he were still carrying the scars of a life he hadn't yet let go of. I couldn't help but wonder, could I let go of my own scars? The horse took another step closer. His nostrils flared, the air in front of him seeming to carry more weight than the ground beneath him. And then, almost imperceptibly, his gaze shifted toward me. For a fleeting moment, our eyes locked. I froze. His dark brown eyes were filled with something that I couldn't quite place, a mixture of wariness and curiosity. It was a look that said, "I see you, but also, can I trust you?" It was strange, but I felt the same way. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like he wasn't just looking at me as a girl in a chair. He saw something deeper, something unspoken. "Go on," my father said gently. I hesitated. My heart raced in my chest, the words "he won't hurt you" echoing in my mind. Tentatively, I extended my hand toward Thunder, my fingers brushing against the cool air just inches away from his nose. He shifted slightly, lowering his head, and before I knew it, his warm, velvety muzzle gently touched my palm. The softness of his touch was startling, so gentle, yet carrying an undeniable power. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the quiet of the moment surround me. Thunder snorted softly, and I let out a soft laugh, surprised by the sound of it. It felt like a distant memory, that sound, but one I hadn't heard in so long. A laugh that came from something inside me that had been buried deep. It was a laugh that was free of pain, free of the weight I had carried for so many years. And then, just as quickly as it had happened, Thunder pulled away, stepping back and lifting his head once more. His eyes still held a depth of sadness, but there was something else there now, something more curious, something more hopeful. I felt a quiet connection in that brief touch, a bond formed in silence, a thread woven between us. And I wondered, just for a moment, if this could be the beginning of something new. Over the next few days, Thunder seemed to drift in and out of my life. He would stand by the barn, watching me from a distance, his eyes heavy with the burden of the world. I didn't understand what kept him so distant, why he wouldn't let me get too close. But in a way, I understood. He had his own wounds, his own battles that hadn't yet healed. Maybe, just like me, he didn't know how to trust again. My father was always there, guiding Thunder through the slow process of rehabilitation. He spent hours with him in the field, coaxing the horse to trust again, feeding him, letting him roam, and slowly, day by day, Thunder seemed to grow stronger. His ribs began to fill out, his coat shining a little brighter. Yet, despite the physical changes, Thunder still remained distant, aloof, even. And I couldn't help but feel the same way. Even as I watched my father work with Thunder, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really a part of it. The horse seemed to trust my father, but not me. The touch that had once felt so soft and tentative had begun to feel like a memory, a fleeting moment that couldn't be recaptured. It wasn't until a particularly quiet afternoon, when the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the barnyard, that I finally found myself face to face with Thunder again. My father had gone inside for a bit, leaving me alone by the fence. It wasn't intentional, but I'd grown accustomed to being by myself in the silence, in the peacefulness of the afternoon. As I sat there, watching the wind stir the grass, I noticed Thunder grazing near the edge of the field. He seemed calm, at peace for the first time in days. His head was low, grazing the fresh green grass, but his ears twitched in the direction of my wheelchair. Without thinking, I wheeled myself closer. Slowly, quietly, I moved forward, inch by inch. Thunder raised his head and looked at me, his eyes soft but still uncertain. I reached out my hand, just as I had the first time. This time, my fingers hovered over the air just above his head, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. Thunder didn't move. He simply stood there, watching me with those deep, searching eyes. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I gently touched his mane, my fingers brushing against the soft strands. Thunder's head dipped slightly, as though acknowledging my presence. I held my breath, waiting for him to pull away, waiting for him to show me that I wasn't welcome. But instead, Thunder stood still, letting me touch him, as if he was choosing to trust me, for the first time. The connection that had felt so fragile, so impossible, suddenly felt real. Thunder wasn't just a horse. He was a living, breathing soul, carrying his own scars, his own journey. And so was I. The days bled into weeks, each one blending into the next, each one stretching like an eternity in the silence between me and Thunder. Yet, every day, there was a little more hope, an ember flickering somewhere deep inside both of us. I noticed it in the way his coat grew thicker, in the way his steps became more confident. But I also saw it in the way he'd glance at me, his eyes following my movements, his body swaying slightly as if he was trying to decide something. It wasn't easy to figure out how to reach Thunder. The other horses seemed so natural, so comfortable with people. But not Thunder. He was different. He carried the weight of something too heavy to put into words, and it made him hard to read. I began to understand that Thunder was like me, caught in his own cage, though it wasn't one made of metal. His cage was built from past wounds, from betrayal and neglect, and I could feel it in every muscle of his frame.
And me?
I was still confined to my own chair, still surrounded by my own invisible cage. My legs didn't work, but neither did my soul feel like it was truly free. One afternoon, as I sat by the fence, I found myself wondering how I could get through to him.
What did he need to know?
What would make him trust me? My thoughts were interrupted when I heard the soft clatter of hooves. I looked up, startled, to see Thunder standing near the edge of the field. He was staring at me, his ears flicking toward the sound of my wheelchair's wheels. He was closer this time than he had been in days, almost as if he had come to seek me out. I felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Could this be the moment? Was he finally ready to connect? Slowly, carefully, I wheeled myself forward, feeling every inch of movement in my body as I moved closer. Thunder remained still, his eyes watching me intently, his body tense but not backing away. His nostrils flared as if trying to catch my scent, and I could feel his awareness in the air between us. I reached out a hand, as I had done so many times before. The space between us seemed vast, but for some reason, I felt a flicker of hope. Something new, something different, something that had been missing before. Thunder took a small step forward. I held my breath. Another step. And then, without warning, he lowered his head and gently nudged my hand with his nose. The touch was so soft that I almost didn't believe it had happened.
But it had. Thunder had made the...
My heart pounded in my chest. I stroked his muzzle, feeling the warmth of his breath, the roughness of his coat. It was like touching a wild thing, a creature who had known freedom and loss, yet was choosing, in this moment, to let me in. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than the weight of my wheelchair. I felt light, as though the connection I had longed for, between him and me, between two souls who were both broken and healing, was finally beginning to take shape. But just as quickly as the moment had come, it was gone. Thunder lifted his head and took a few cautious steps back. His eyes still followed me, but there was hesitation there, a distance that seemed both physical and emotional.
I couldn't blame him.
I knew what it was like to hold back, to be scared of what might happen if you let someone in. Days passed, and Thunder's trust didn't come easily. I wasn't sure what I had expected, some magical moment where he would suddenly accept me fully, but what I got instead was a long, slow process. Each time I saw him, I felt the same mix of hope and frustration. It was like chasing the wind. Just when I thought I could catch it, it would slip through my fingers. But something was changing, even if I couldn't always see it. Thunder was learning to trust, step by slow step.
And in turn, I was learning to trust, too.
One morning, I woke up early and wheeled myself out to the field before anyone else was awake. I needed to be alone with my thoughts, and I knew Thunder might be out there, grazing near the fence, his large body casting a shadow against the rising sun. I wheeled myself to the usual spot, the same one where I'd watched him from a distance for so many weeks.
Thunder was there.
He was grazing, his head down, but when he heard the soft click of my wheels on the gravel, he paused.
His ears. I didn't know what to do.
I had come here with the idea that maybe, just maybe, something would be different today.
But how could I bridge the gap? How could I make him understand?
As if on cue, Thunder began to walk toward me, his hooves soft against the earth. It wasn't a confident, proud stride like I had seen in other horses, but it was still a step forward. He moved slowly, carefully, as though testing the waters. When he reached me, he stopped, standing just a few feet away. He looked down at me, as if waiting for something. I felt a surge of something. Courage, perhaps. I took a deep breath and reached out my hand toward him again, this time a little more certain. I let my fingers hover near his muzzle, waiting for him to make the choice. For a long moment, Thunder stood still, his body tense. But then, ever so gently, his nose touched my fingers. The warmth of his breath tickled my skin, and I felt a quiet thrill. He had chosen to trust me again. But this time, something was different. I didn't feel the need to rush. I didn't feel the desire to force the connection. I simply stood there, with my hand resting lightly on his muzzle, and I let the quiet stretch between us, as if we were both learning how to heal together, step by step. Thunder's movements became more assured over time, his once hesitant steps growing steadier and more graceful. The horse that had once been a shadow of his former self now seemed to carry a quiet strength in every step he took. His coat, once thin and patchy, was now glossy and full, his muscles more defined beneath his skin. But what I noticed the most was his eyes. They had gone from filled with distrust and sadness to something else entirely, something more curious, more open. They had softened, and every time they met mine, I could feel a flicker of recognition. Thunder was no longer just a horse. He was becoming something else. Something more. I didn't know it yet, but this journey wasn't just Thunder's, it was mine too. One afternoon, after days of gradual progress, I wheeled myself to the edge of the field, just as I had so many times before. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden beams across the horizon, painting the world in soft amber hues. Thunder was grazing, but when I approached, he didn't hesitate. He looked up and, with a calmness that seemed almost intentional, walked toward me. He came closer than he ever had, his large hooves kicking up tiny clouds of dust as he moved. I held my breath, my fingers tightening on the armrests of my chair. Was he ready? Was this the moment where I could truly begin to feel what it was like to connect with him? As if sensing my nervousness, Thunder slowed his pace, coming to a gentle stop just a few feet away from me. He stood there, still as a statue, watching me with those deep brown eyes. His nostrils flared, and for a long moment, the world around us seemed to pause. I reached out my hand, not in hesitation, but with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. This time, I wasn't scared. This time, I wasn't wondering if he would pull away or retreat. I simply knew what I had to do. My fingers brushed against his muzzle once more, but this time, it wasn't just a light touch. This time, I let my hand linger there, feeling the warmth of his breath, the texture of his coat beneath my fingertips. Thunder didn't move, didn't pull away. He stood there, calm and trusting, allowing me into his world. I felt something shift inside me, something deep, like the stirring of something that had been dormant for so long. For the first time in years, I felt a connection to something outside of myself, something that wasn't broken, something that was alive. Thunder's head tilted slightly, and he pressed his muzzle against my hand more firmly. It was as though he was offering something. His trust, his strength, his belief that there was a way out of the pain. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and in that moment, I felt something unbelievable. The world around me seemed to melt away, and all I could feel was the warmth of Thunder's presence. It was like everything had come full circle, both of us, once broken, once lost, now finding a way to heal together. For the first time, I no longer felt the heavy weight of the wheelchair, the pain of the past. It was as if Thunder had taken it all with him, his quiet strength becoming my own. Days turned into weeks, and Thunder's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. He had come from a place of deep suffering, a place where survival had been his only focus. But now, he had a different purpose. It was as though the very air around him had changed. His movements were fluid, his body powerful, his spirit no longer caged by his past. I noticed that when I came outside, Thunder was often waiting for me. He'd stand by the barn or near the edge of the field, his eyes scanning the horizon, waiting for me to come into view. There was something deeply comforting in that, something that made my heart swell with emotion. It was as if Thunder had made a decision, one that I couldn't fully understand, but one that spoke to something deeper.
And I had made a decision, too.
It wasn't long before my visits to Thunder became a daily ritual. The barn, the fields, the quiet sounds of the earth beneath my wheels, these had become the backdrop to my healing. Each day, I would sit by the fence, watching as Thunder grazed or stretched his legs in the soft grass, and we would share the quiet company of one another. It wasn't always about touch or words, it was just about being there, in that space together. But every time Thunder looked at me, I felt something shift. He seemed to know me in a way that no one else did, as if he had seen the hidden parts of me, the ones I kept locked away, and still accepted me. I began to believe that perhaps the bond between us was deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just about him being a horse and me being a girl in a wheelchair. It was about two creatures who had experienced pain and loss, and through that, had found each other. One afternoon, as I sat by the fence, Thunder approached me once again. This time, though, he didn't stop. He came up close, standing right beside me, his warm body pressing against my chair. I held my breath, unsure of what to do. But then, Thunder bent his head low, nuzzling my shoulder gently with his nose. I felt a shiver of surprise run through me, but then a warmth, deep inside, that melted away all the doubts I had once carried. Thunder had accepted me, completely. And in doing so, he had given me something that I had almost forgotten was possible, a sense of peace. Weeks went by, and I continued to spend my days with Thunder. The bond between us grew stronger with each passing moment. My father noticed the change in me, the way my eyes seemed brighter, the way my smile came more easily now. He would often watch from a distance, a proud and quiet observer of this transformation that was happening, not just to Thunder, but to me. One evening, after a long day, I found myself by the fence once more. Thunder was near, grazing contentedly, and I was lost in the rhythmic sound of the wind rustling the trees, the soft whispers of nature that had always been just beyond my reach. It was in this stillness that I felt a shift. I had spent so many years looking at the world through the lens of what I couldn't do, what had been taken from me. But now, sitting there with Thunder by my side, I realized something that had eluded me for so long. I was not defined by my wheelchair. I was not defined by the limits I had been given. I was defined by my ability to rise, to reach out, and to heal. Thunder had shown me that. His transformation had mirrored my own, and as I watched him, strong, confident, and free, I understood that I, too, had the power to be more than just a girl in a chair. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Thunder was becoming the heart of the barn. His transformation was palpable. His movements were no longer hesitant but graceful. Where there was once wariness, now there was a quiet pride in his eyes, a sense of belonging. Every day, when I wheeled myself out into the field, he would approach me, slowly but with purpose, as though he, too, had learned the rhythm of this newfound bond. The feeling of his body pressing against my wheelchair became a source of strength. The warmth of his coat, the steady rhythm of his breath, the slight tilt of his head as he watched me, all of it made me feel a connection deeper than words could convey. It was an understanding, an unspoken language forged through shared pain, healing, and trust. That connection wasn't just one-sided. In my own life, I had been searching for something, a reason to wake up with purpose, to feel as though I wasn't just drifting. And Thunder, this horse who had been through so much, had shown me that purpose. Just as he needed me, I needed him. I didn't know when it happened, but I could feel it deep within me. He was more than a horse to me now. He was a companion, a guide, a silent partner in this slow dance of healing we were both engaged in. My mornings, which had once been filled with a heavy silence, were now filled with moments of quiet joy. Thunder would follow me around the pasture, grazing alongside me as I sat in my chair. At times, I'd laugh at the way he would nudge the back of my chair, as though reminding me that he was still there, still by my side. He wasn't just a rescued horse anymore. Thunder was a symbol of my own healing, proof that despite the scars, the past didn't have to define us. We were both products of brokenness, yet we had found a way to heal. Together. One afternoon, I felt the subtle shift of energy in the air. It was an unspoken moment, but I knew it was coming. Thunder had grown more comfortable with me, no longer hesitant about touching me or standing close. But that day, I could feel something different in him, a quiet readiness. I could see it in his eyes. For the first time, I wheeled myself to the middle of the field, and instead of sitting by the fence, I stayed in the open. Thunder watched me, his dark eyes studying me carefully. There was something so powerful in that look, something so knowing. I had been cautious in my movements, afraid to push him too hard, afraid of rushing his transformation. But there, in the openness of the field, with nothing between us but the earth and the sky, I realized how much I had held back. Thunder took a step toward me, then another. I braced myself, unsure of what would happen. The air around us crackled with tension, a mixture of excitement and fear. What if he wasn't ready for this?
What if I was pushing too hard? What if?
But before I could finish the thought, Thunder was standing right next to me, his breath warm on my cheek.
I could feel the heat of his body against mine.
He stood perfectly still, allowing me to take in the power of his presence.
Then, he did something that took my breath away. He lowered his head and nuzzled my shoulder, the movement so gentle, so tender, that I could barely believe it was happening.
It was the moment I had been waiting for. Thunder had crossed the threshold, not just physically, but emotionally. He trusted me, truly, fully. And in that trust, I felt something shift within myself. I could feel the walls I had built around my heart crumbling, piece by piece. For the first time since my accident, I felt like I was truly seen, not as someone in a wheelchair, not as someone broken, but as someone worthy of connection. And in that moment, Thunder wasn't just a horse. He was a mirror reflecting back to me my own healing, my own growth. It was a cool morning when the opportunity finally came. My father had been talking about it for weeks, always hinting at the possibility, but I had never dared to believe it would actually happen. But now, as I wheeled myself out into the yard, my heart racing in anticipation, I realized today was the day.
Thunder was grazing by the fence, his head lowered to the ground, his long tail swishing lazily.
But when he saw me, his head shot up, his ears flicking forward. He stood still for a moment, his gaze focused on me.
And then, without a moment's hesitation, he began to walk toward me.
My father stood by the gate, watching, a small smile tugging at his lips. He knew what I was thinking, knew the fear that had been holding me back all this time. But now, with Thunder walking toward me with such purpose, I felt something different. The distance between us seemed to close in an instant. Thunder's hooves padded softly against the earth as he reached me. My father was right there beside me, his H. The moment I was seated, everything changed. It wasn't like any ride I had ever experienced before. The world beneath me shifted. The ground seemed to rise and fall beneath Thunder's powerful gait, and I could feel the pulse of his muscles in every step.
But it wasn't just the motion. It was the way I felt in that moment, sitting atop this horse who had come from nothing, who had healed from a broken past. And together, we were moving forward. Thunder moved with such grace, his steps light but sure, and I could feel the trust between us, stronger than any bond one had ever known.
It wasn't just a ride, it was a new chapter. A new beginning.
As the wind rushed through my hair and the world blurred around us, I realized that this moment, this ride, was a symbol of everything I had come to understand in my journey with Thunder.
The horse I had once seen as broken was now the one who carried me, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, toward a future full of possibility.
We were both transformed. We had both found strength in each other.
And in that quiet, powerful bond, I knew that the impossible had become real. I had always believed that the wheelchair defined me. It wasn't just an object, it was my constant companion, the one thing I couldn't escape, the one reminder of the accident that had stolen my former life. I thought my world would always be small, limited by the wheels that kept me grounded. But Thunder had begun to show me something else, something more profound than I had ever thought possible. When I was lifted onto his back that cool morning, the world felt different. Thunder's coat was warm beneath me, his movements gentle yet strong, carrying me across the field as if he had always known how to make me feel safe. His gait was steady and confident, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a passenger in my own life.
I felt alive, truly, truly.
The wind rushed through my hair, a sensation I had forgotten, and for a moment, I closed my eyes, letting it carry me away. It wasn't just the physical sensation of being on Thunder's back that made my heart race. It was the realization that I was no longer bound by limitations.
That maybe, just maybe, I could reach for something more than I had ever thought possible.
We moved across the pasture, Thunder's steps perfectly in sync with mine. I could feel his strength, the muscles in his body flexing under his coat as we moved. He was powerful, yes, but there was a gentleness to him that held me close, a reassurance that I was safe, that nothing would hurt me. As we reached the edge of the field, I noticed something I hadn't before, the horizon. It had always seemed so far away, unreachable, just out of sight. But as thunder carried me forward, it didn't seem so distant anymore. The world that I had once thought was too big to touch was now within my grasp. Thunder had carried me to this moment, this place where the impossible suddenly felt possible. The reality of what was happening hit me all at once. This was more than just a ride. It was a moment of transformation, a turning point in my life. It wasn't Thunder who had changed, it was me. Through him, I had found a way to open myself up to new possibilities. To feel freedom in a way I never thought I would again. I could feel his steady rhythm beneath me, the powerful pulse of life moving through both of us. I was no longer just a girl in a wheelchair. I was a rider, a part of something greater than myself, a connection that transcended the boundaries of what had once been. That evening, after the ride, I sat beside Thunder, my hand resting on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my fingertips. We were alone together in the quiet of the barn, just the two of us, the last rays of the setting sun streaming through the cracks in the barn door. My heart was full in a way I didn't have words for, but I knew it was a feeling that would stay with me forever. Thunder had given me more than just a ride. He had given me back the belief in myself. He had shown me that healing wasn't just about time passing, it was about trust. It was about learning to open your heart again, to take risks, to let someone else in, even when you've been broken before. As I sat there with him, my fingers grazing the soft strands of his mane, I realized just how much he had changed me. I had never thought it was possible. But here I was, sitting beside a horse who had come from darkness, who had healed and grown, who had become a symbol of resilience. And in him, I had found a reflection of my own strength, my own capacity to heal. I had been afraid. Afraid of the unknown, of what might happen if I trusted too much, if I allowed myself to hope again. But Thunder had taught me that fear could only hold me back if I let it. He had shown me that even in the face of pain and loss, there was always a chance for growth, a chance for something beautiful to emerge. I looked at him, his eyes reflecting the fading light of the day, and I understood something in that moment. Thunder hadn't just. My father came into the barn, watching us quietly from the doorway. His smile was small, but it spoke volumes. He didn't need to say anything. He had seen the changes in both of us, the way we had grown together, the way we had become a team, a family of sorts. And he knew that this was only the beginning. Thunder nickered softly, turning his head toward me. It was as if he were saying, "Are you ready for more?" I smiled, the answer already clear in my heart. "I'm ready." Thunder's presence had become a steady anchor in my life. More than just the horse who had healed me physically, he had begun to shape my emotional recovery in ways that I couldn't fully explain. The bond we had formed over the past few months had not only mended his brokenness but had slowly started to heal the cracks in my own soul. He had shown me that it was possible to believe in something greater than the hurt, something stronger than the fear of falling again. One evening, after a long day of work around the farm, my father invited me out for a walk, something that used to be a daily routine for us before my accident. I hesitated at first, my chair's wheels catching the familiar uneven ground, but then I thought of Thunder. "Why not?" I thought, as my father gently guided the chair forward. We rolled toward the pasture, and Thunder was waiting for me. I could tell by the way he shifted his weight and perked his ears that he recognized our approach. My heart swelled as I thought about everything we had gone through together. The trust, the quiet moments, the powerful rides. The connection between us was undeniable. It had become so much more than just me and a horse. Thunder had grown to be a part of my healing journey, a part of me. He trotted over to the fence as I wheeled closer, and once again, his eyes met mine. There was something in his gaze, gentle, steadfast, telling me that, yes, this was our moment, our bond. And it had grown deeper, richer than anything I had expected when I first laid eyes on him months ago. My father's voice broke the silence. "You know, I think he's ready for you to ride again." I looked up at my father, my breath catching in my throat. My father, the same one who had doubted whether it would ever be possible for me to ride again, was standing there, his eyes filled with a soft certainty. He could see it now too, what Thunder and I had become together. We had both transformed, and there was no going back. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I said, my voice filled with hesitation, even though I could feel a quiet yearning within me. I wasn't sure if I could do it. "What if someth?" "You'll never know until you try," my father said, his voice full of warmth. And so, with his encouragement, I found the courage to do what I hadn't thought possible. I wheeled my chair closer to Thunder,
watching as he stood still, waiting patiently. My father helped me move from the chair to the mounting block, and with careful, practiced movements, I mounted Thunder's back. The world seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, I felt as if time had stopped. I hadn't ridden Thunder in weeks, and yet as I settled into place, I realized it was almost as if we had never stopped. Thunder's body was strong beneath me, his steps as fluid as ever. I could feel the familiar warmth of his coat beneath my legs, and a new sense of peace washed over me. My fear, while still present, began to fade, replaced by a sense of trust and certainty. We began to move. Slowly at first, one gentle step at a time, Thunder's movements steady and unwavering. And with each step, I felt something new, a liberation. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a girl who had been defined by her wheelchair. I was a rider, moving through the world on the back of a horse who had helped me believe that I was capable of so much more. The breeze ruffled through my hair as we moved across the field, the world unfolding in front of us. I could feel Thunder's power, his strength, his spirit. And in return, I knew that my own spirit was finally starting to heal. This wasn't just about me riding a horse, it was about reclaiming the life I had almost forgotten was possible. It was about rediscovering the parts of me that had been buried in fear and pain. With Thunder, I was no longer bound by my limitations. I was free. Over the following weeks, I rode Thunder more frequently. Every ride was a reminder of how far we had come together. The farm, once a place of quiet reflection, had transformed into a landscape of new beginnings. The pasture no longer seemed like a distant world I could only look at, it had become my world too, one where Thunder and I moved freely, side by side. But it wasn't just about the rides anymore. Thunder had shown me that healing wasn't always a straight line. There were days when I felt stronger, and days when my body or my mind would remind me of the journey I had taken. There were days when my wheelchair still seemed like a part of me I couldn't escape, but Thunder was always there, his presence a reminder that healing came in waves. Some days would be easier than others, and that was okay. The key was to keep moving, keep pushing forward. One evening, after a particularly beautiful ride, I stopped Thunder by the barn. We stood there, side by side, and I ran my fingers through his mane, the soft strands slipping through my hands. His eyes, deep and soulful, met mine, and I realized that, in that moment, we were both exactly where we needed to be. I didn't need to say anything. Thunder understood. I had come so far, and so had he. We had both healed, but the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. As I looked at him, I realized that Thunder wasn't just a horse who had rescued me. He was my partner, my guide, the one who had helped me see the world with new eyes. Through his transformation, he had shown me that healing was possible, even when it seemed impossible. And just as Thunder had been given a second chance, I, too, had been given the chance to live a life full of freedom, hope, and possibility. And just as Thunder had been given a second chance, I, too, had been given the chance to live a life full of freedom, hope, and possibility. As the months passed, the rhythm of life between Thunder and me became as natural as breathing. We had become inseparable, a pair that had healed each other in ways that no one, not even the doctors or my father, had believed was possible. There were still hard days, days when my body felt too tired, too weak, or when my mind wandered to the past, to the accident that had changed everything. But then, Thunder would nudge my chair with his soft nose, or he would let out a gentle whinny to remind me that we were a team, and together, we could overcome anything. The farm had become our sanctuary. Each day, I'd wake up to the sound of birds chirping and Thunder's rhythmic breathing. My father had built a small ramp up to the barn so that I could easily access the stables, and Thunder had become my steady companion as we both found our way forward in life. Sometimes I would sit and simply watch him graze, marveling at how far we had both come. Other times, I would ride him through the fields, feeling the wind in my hair and the power of his body beneath me. I knew, deep down, that Thunder had given me more than just the ability to ride again. He had given me a sense of self that I hadn't known I had lost. With each ride, with each small victory, I learned to trust myself again, to believe that life had more in store for me than what I had once thought possible. It had been 2 years since that first ride, the one that had changed everything. My wheelchair was still part of my life, but it no longer defined me. I no longer saw myself as someone confined by my circumstances. I was a rider, a partner, a woman who had reclaimed a piece of herself that she had long ago thought lost. Thunder, once a broken, wary horse, had transformed into something far beyond my expectations. He was my healer, my strength,
my companion. His coat had grown even shinier, his stride even more confident. He was no longer the troubled, malnourished animal I had first met in that barn. He had become a majestic creature, his transformation a mirror of my own. One morning, after our usual ride, I sat on the edge of the fence, watching Thunder graze. My father stood beside me, silently observing the field. It was one of those quiet moments when you didn't need words to understand the depth of the changes that had occurred. "You've come a long way," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." I smiled softly, my gaze fixed on Thunder as he chewed peacefully. "We've come a long way together." My father nodded, a faint smile appearing on his face. "It's incredible. You were right. Thunder was the one you needed. And you were the one he needed." The thought of how much had changed, how much we had both healed, was overwhelming. I felt a lump in my throat as I looked at my father. The pain, the doubts, the fear of what I might never do again, it had all faded away, replaced with something more powerful. We had both been broken, in our own ways, but together we had found a way to heal. Thunder had rescued me, yes, but in return, I had given him the love and trust he needed to heal. We had saved each other. As the sun began to set over the fields, casting a golden glow across the horizon, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The future no longer seemed so uncertain. There were still challenges ahead, of course, but with Thunder by my side, I felt ready for whatever came next. As I wheeled toward the barn, Thunder trotted beside me, his head held high. I didn't know where the road would lead, but one thing was certain. With him, I would never feel alone again. Together, we had found our way to this moment, and together, we would face whatever came next.